One of the things that really worries me sometimes is that people have acquired, by one way or another, some kind of wording or ritual uh, that it's not a ritual, but whatever it is that they acquire, because the lack of training, they think because they're high priest or high priestess that
Hmm.
they will figure it out, because they will actually do with that what it's supposed to be done, although there is a clear lack of training on this particular ritual or procedure or whatever it is. So just because you acquired wording of something that came from Alex and Maxine, for instance, it doesn't mean that you know everything about it.
No.
The first worry about this for me is if I find something like that, the first thing I think is, where is the oral lore? Because there is oral lore that comes with it, right? So I'm thinking about, for instance, something that I've heard people throwing a lot these days, which is the rite of sending forth by day and night, which is something that was done to Alex when he died, and he was performed by the priesthood to him. But this is a very particular rite, and I've heard people talking about it, and it's not really something that is talked about, actually, even between people that were there.
Huh.
They don't talk about this. We don't hear them talking about this. It's not really something that it's done every week, most certainly. Um, that would be a very bad sign.
That would be
Uh,
a very yeah. Something.
but it's something that when I encountered this and I saw the wording and everything, I immediately knew that this was not actually something that was complete.
Yeah.
It can't be. This text that it's in here, it isn't complete. It can't be complete. This cannot be it.
Yeah.
There should be training behind this, and there should be oral lore.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that holds true with all of our texts, right? So therefore, as Alex even said, I could give somebody the Book of Shadows verbatim, and they still would not be able to know how to actually work it. Because it is sort of this bare bones, just skeletal outline, and you absolutely need the training and the lore, right? The oral lore to understand the mechanism and what else to do, actually how to work the right.
Exactly.
This should
So
come as no surprise to all those greedy knowledge accumulators who just want a pile of stuff.
yes, and then the arrogance, I think, that people have in, oh, I got this.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
like, no, you don't.
As you
You
hear
don't
this
got.
all the time. Oh, I've got
Oh
that.
my
I've got that
God.
somewhere. That's in a folder somewhere. Yep.
So I'm going to tell you the story about my experience with the sending forth. The sending forth was it came to me like it came to many, I'm sure, via a text that I had the opportunity to have, and I looked at it, and immediately, exactly what I'm saying just before, immediately I thought, there's more to this. Where is the oral lore?
Yep.
Because there will be oral lore that goes with this and how the thing is done. Because the text doesn't tell you. It tells you what to say, but it doesn't. And it gives a little brief introduction of what it is about, but it doesn't really actually say to you how to do it,
Yeah.
you know. And I remember that I immediately contacted Maxine and I said, how do you do a sending forth? And what she told me was, I'm not telling you.
Sounds like a response. Yep. That's you.
And I said, why not? And she said, because it's not the time.
Yeah.
And I immediately understood, it is not the time because some things in the craft are taught when the time is right, which means
Exactly.
that
When necessary.
when necessary.
Yeah.
So uh, I thought immediately, okay, so I will never learn this because,
And then it's a blow to the ego. And
yes,
we're human beings, right? So
I will.
Then it's
Yeah.
low to like, wait, why won't you tell me? Like,
Why don't you tell me?
yeah.
And it looks like, how dare you asking that, right? Because how arrogant, why? I am an initiate as well. I need to know.
Yeah.
Well, no, you don't.
No, you
No,
don't.
you don't need to know. You need to know when you need to know.
Yeah.
And that's how it's done.
Yep.
And that's the lesson I've learned from her. So she said to me, no, I'm not telling you. And I immediately understood why and how, and absolutely understood. And I said, okay, that's fine. So this was years later. An unfortunate event happened, and an initiate died. And I didn't even think about, oh my God, this is the golden opportunity. I didn't even, you know what I mean?
Eureka.
No, until one of the high priestesses said to me, do you think that we could do a sending forth? And I said, oh, I don't know how to do it. But then I remembered the conversation with Maxine. I said, okay, here's the opportunity for me to understand how this is done. And I contacted Maxine again. And I said, this happened, unfortunately. And we talked a little bit about it. And then I said, can you now tell me, well, it depends. I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah.
It depends? Yeah. What do you mean? And it depends. Is it necessary?
Yeah.
These things are not really done in a factory line. This is not done over and over and over again. Sometimes it's not necessary, and sometimes it is necessary, So you have to think about this. You have to think, is it necessary? And then after reflection, and after we talked about this, she said, okay, so you'll have to do, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it this way, this way, this way, this way. I'm not going to say here how it's done.
Of course.
But what I can tell you is that this is exactly how she told me this. And it's absolutely important, I think, that people understand what the sending forth is and how it's done. It isn't a rite. It isn't a funerary rite. It isn't a funerary anything.
Yeah.
It isn't a mourning rite. It isn't anything like that. And she was very clear about this. She said, Maxine said, this is a magical act. And that's what she said.
Yeah.
So if people think and are thinking that this is a rite of passage or a rite that is a funerary rite, they're thinking wrong, because that's not what it was.
Yeah. And it's not done for every death or situation like that. No.
So for me, it was revealing of the nature, not only of this simple, very straightforward, direct rite, but it was also a lesson for me on magic, really. Yeah. Because it told me you will only have to know when you need to know. And so I've learned a lot from this experience. But this is just to clarify, because it seems to be a lot of conversation about this. Seems to be that people think that they know probably how to or what this is. This isn't. And what you have, if you have the training, that is absolutely amazing and it's wonderful. But if you don't have it, don't think that you do, because you don't.
Yeah, just because you have a script doesn't mean you actually know.
Doesn't mean that you know what to do.
Yep.
That's right. So it is very important that people know this.
Some of these things that's just the way the craft works, right? Where it's on a sort of need, some of it, not all of it, of course, is on a need to know basis. And I think we talked about this, Karagan, in terms of like cursing. Not everyone is taught how to curse. And that again, it takes a certain sort of a certain individual. And I think in the craft, you almost have to get you have to humble yourself in some ways, right? In terms of your mundane ego, where no, not everything is going to be revealed to you.
The other thing is, Alex was very clear about this. Actually, this came about in What Witches Do, and also in other places, including Firechild, which is the use of drugs in the craft. brought this up, right? This question,
Yeah.
as
Yes, I
there.
brought this up because, well, it was funny. I have speaking with a seeker, just in terms of hearing a lot about Alexandrians and drinking wine, which I think that also gets sort of perpetuated by Alexandrians, where it becomes the joke, right, of just like, oh yes, I'm an Alexandrian because I drink a lot of wine and I burn a lot of incense. But I think the question is like, well, how much wine do you drink, right? In terms of like, must you be inebriated to perform circle?
Well,
And then
this is the thing. I think that if if you don't do anything right as an Alexandrian, at least drink wine and use a lot of incense.
exactly right.
This
At
when
the end of the day,
there's no dispute.
at the end of the day, then that just should be the goal.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else. But then it was a serious, it was a legitimate, right? It's a legitimate question. Because there's this perception, God, they must be all drunkards, sloshing around, and I can understand why there is that perception there that is broadcast on social media and whatnot. And then it was the conversation too about drug use, in terms of hearing from other sources about the use of marijuana, for example, before circle, and whether or not that is an Alexandrian practice.
Alex was very clear about drug use, and Maxine as well. Alex actually helped addicts to recover from drug abuse. And he was adamant about this, as well as Maxine, that there would not be drug use in their covens. So this is something that I've heard as well. I've heard this, and I don't know where this thing came from, this rumor, because I've heard also people saying, if Alex did, why can't we?
Yeah.
And I don't know where that comes from, because what I always taught this was that there was no drugs in Alex's coven, and he was very much adamant to make people recover from the abuse and the drug use rather than use it. But then again, people say, well, what about in the craft? What about, no. Altered states of consciousness can be attained by occult techniques. You don't have to, that you control.
Yeah.
That you can enhance and that you can control. You don't need any drugs to do it. And of course, you might argue that wine is a drug. Yes, we do drink wine. It is part of our liturgy, actually.
Yeah.
But it isn't the consuming of the wine that we are celebrating. We're celebrating something else. There's a mystery there that I'm not going to talk about. But I think that people are very literal. They're very shallow sometimes in their own understanding. I have to say this. I'm sorry if I'm, offending people, but this is what it is. I'm so tired of people getting into this low level of basic stuff. Anything and everything in the craft is a symbol.
Yeah.
That it's never looked at as a symbol, often looked at as literal, which is a shame.
I know it goes well beyond the physical object.
I don't know why people think that this is not, this is not how it's done. I don't understand why people think that, yes, there are people who drink a lot. Yes, there are alcoholics. Yes, there are all kinds of people in everywhere. But that doesn't mean that that was what it is done or it was done. I don't know. I just feel that people are very, very on this very low level, literal kind of thing, and they just run through it. it's very, very, very sad.
Yeah, and I think like what you mentioned before is that it's in some ways, I think for some individuals, it becomes a crutch, right? It becomes a crutch to be able to enter into that altered state of consciousness.
Definitely.
And sometimes it's the only way for them to enter into an altered state of consciousness, which we certainly don't teach, right? There's many, many techniques and methods. And then I'm always worried about, if you're completely inebriated in some way or another, how much does that interfere with your will, right? And enacting your will and the responsibility that you hold within sacred space.
Well, if that's the only way they have to attain altered states of consciousness, it's the consuming of wine or any other substance, then they're utterly incompetent.
Say what you feel. Don't hold back, Harry.
They're incompetent and they're absolutely lacking of potential. If somebody doesn't have the ability to attain an altered state of consciousness unless they're drunk or they are inebriated or they're smoking
high on something,
then they're incompetent. We have to talk about what people, this is it is what it is. I have no shame at all. If they can't do it, then they're incompetent. Sorry.
And it's just so, now I'm getting judgy, right? But it's just like that drunk person at the party that no one wants to be around because they're just making a fool of themselves. And we've seen this, right?
The lack of control, lack of control.
And you see it.
Yeah.
And we have certainly seen this, broadcasted on social media where, people are not in their proper faculties, maybe drank a little bit. And then you see when the mask falls, and the mask oftentimes makes a big thud when it falls, and it's a window into their world, and it's something that becomes embarrassing.
It's
certainly not a magical act, at all.
No, that's actually the definition of not a magical.
Exactly.
But yes, so and then there is this other concept which is very interesting as well, which is the witch queen concept, which is
why is it so controversial, this witchcraft?
I don't know. I don't understand why. But it is for some. I think that it's actually a joke for other people. There is a lot of jokes about the witch queen and all that. But, it's a real thing. It does happen. I feel that because it is a circumstantial thing and because it is something that you can't really bestow upon anybody, that it's something that happens spontaneously, in consequence of the work that has been done in a coven, or by a coven that has so many people coming out, not because they want to put out people. That's another thing that we need to talk about, is the obsession that people today, the initiates all over the world, have with quantity.
Oh God, numbers game. Absolute numbers.
Right. So, but talking about witch queen, so the work that this coven does is really, it's wonderful. And I think that witch queens are rarer and rarer right now, more rare than anything else. I really think that they're I was going to say rarer than a good coven, but but they are very rare because there is no such work at the moment happening. When a coven actually works a lot, and out of that coven comes out 3 or more covens, fully fleshed covens that are independent. So that's a lot of work. That's 3 people or 3 couples, each one with the capability and potential to actually run their own groups, and coming out of this coven, coming out of it and form their own group with their own people and their own methods and all of that. That's a lot of work on the part of a lot of work and a lot of time. Not hard work, the natural work, because things happen naturally, but it is a lot of time. So things don't really happen as quickly as people think that they they would or wish they would. I mean, if we're talking about 70s, yeah, there was a lot of people interested. Right now, there's not a lot of people
You're
coming in.
absolutely correct. There's not a lot of people
And
who are
of course, this will take
craft.
centuries to happen. But, I think that it's a real thing that should be treated with respect, not with, it's not a joke. I think that why it actually turned to be a joke, it's because people feel incapable of doing it. Therefore, it becomes a joke.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So they can't really attain it, and it becomes a joke. It really isn't something that you aspire to. You don't aspire to be a witch queen. That's not something that you aspire to. It just happens.
Yeah, because it just happens, right?
Yeah.
Because we do not recruit initiates.
No.
So therefore, I don't understand how that would even be an aspiration. In the sense of like, I want to initiate so many people, and then they will go on to Covens, so I can become a witch queen. Like that, I don't think that should not even be in your mentality, right? When entering the craft, a cozy coven of 3 can be absolutely delightful for years and years and years and years, without spawning necessarily, right? Another coven hiving off.
I think I heard this somewhere. I've heard about the children in covens being part of a circle or being part of rituals or whatever. I think that one of the things that it's very interesting is that I think that people sometimes, they're not conscious of why, what is the meaning of it, magically speaking. And this is across the board in terms of a lot of other things that I think that people have no idea on because some probably because they don't talk with a lot of other people, maybe because they don't really they're not really asking the right questions. I don't know, but what I know is that by hearing it, it's clear to me that there is a lack of understanding of why a child should not be in a circle.
Yeah.
A child should never be part of a circle of initiates. And that's one of the things that I really want to reinforce. We only initiate people with 18 years old or above.
Yeah.
Some people only 21 and above.
Yeah, because of
because of obvious issues. But it's not a minor. Has to be not a minor. But also because a child cannot take responsibility for their own actions inside of a circle, and all of the witches should.
Absolutely.
So they have to be conscious enough to take responsibility, and they're not. They're not. They can't be. So that's the reason why this was taught to me. I actually asked the question, why can't a child be? Because you would think, oh, it's so innocent, well. But magically speaking, a child should not be in there. There shouldn't be accommodations of that sort whatsoever, because it is dangerous.
It's just, doesn't I don't know, Karagan, like even if you are brand new to the craft, doesn't your gut intuition tell you this, that children, minors should not be participating in a circle, in a closed coven circle with initiates? Right, who have gone through initiation. These children have not gone through initiation. In no way are they prepared.
They didn't ask. They didn't
ask. Exactly. So it's not. So therefore, just in terms of their own free will, right, or an expression of their will, which has not been formed at this part of their development.
I think they are talking about people with children with parents present, but still, I mean. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be allowed. And
No.
why is this? This is what I was told, and this is the reason why. It's because they can't take responsibility for their own actions. So
yeah, if you want to do some pagan pride,
that's totally that's
exactly go for it.
Yeah,
or something.
If you want to have like a stall with somebody making wands so that children have wands, and it's fine, and go around, the campground doing things. That's fine. But in a circle of initiates, no, we shouldn't be allowed.
I think some witches think like covens are just, different flavors of the week. we're a tarot divination coven.
I think, well, it's wonderful to have covens that do things and,
That specialize.
that specialize.
Yeah.
But nobody talks about the other work, which is the and I think they don't talk about because they don't know what it is. But there is a work that is done, and I was taught this. I didn't know it, so it's not that I'm making this up. It's really something that was included in my training that the coven does. If they attain a certain degree, they will come together and they can actually work that. And it's a wonderful working. And most of the covens do. They have meetings with exactly for that purpose. So there's the kind of work that I always hear about. It's always a work that is tangible, that it's like divination, healing. And I'm not saying that these are not important, but they're not all of it. All of it. There's other workings that are done, that are workings that are different, that nobody actually, sometimes they don't know what it is, but because they were never told that these existed. But they are done in covens in higher degrees, with third degrees or within third degrees. But it's just that it's never talked about because it is really not about, oh, we do this or we specialize in that. That working is actually sometimes depends on the group because the group might not be prepared to do that kind of work.
This fiction about what happens when you attain the higher degrees, or this maybe not understanding of what that actually is, it goes far beyond just being a coven leader and teacher, right, to initiates. There's a lot more that it entails, a lot more different responsibilities in that way, and exactly what you're saying. I'm not sure people really understand what we do once those degrees have been attained.
I think somewhere in our timeline of the craft in general, I think that people lost the plot. I think that they are mistaken about what are the essentials of the craft. I think that people lost complete notion of why are we doing what we do. It was never meant to be a contest. It was never meant to be a dispute about who has more initiates, who has less initiates, who has, who has the more knowledge, who has the closest lineage, who has the, the contacts, who's the student of this one and that one, who's the closest of this one and that one. It's becoming a Game of Thrones, I think. And I'm talking about general craft. I'm not talking about Alexandrian only. It became a Game of Thrones episode, which is really very not important about why we do what we do and the nature of our work. So for me, do you feel this as well? Because I felt I was reflecting on this the other day because, there seems to be a lot of this going on, who's the closest to who's talking with who's not talking with who's a student of this one and that one. And, it's very Game of Thrones-y.
Yeah, it's very, and I can be guilty of it too, right? So it can be very mundane. And you are really dragging it down to this whole social, political, really base, right? Really base level, where you are losing the point, as you said, losing the point of the craft and what we are supposed to be doing. I can't not say that, I make judgment calls where I'm like, oh, this person received great training. This person didn't receive really good training. And then I'm also thinking, so when that's a really great question. When did we lose the plot?
I think we did.
I think we did. I think we absolutely did. I think it's become like a who's who knows more, who's well connected, who wants to be in the spotlight. And obviously, Gardner was a very public witch to the chagrin, right, of others. Alex and Maxine, extremely public, right, as well. But they were sort of just the ones. And then we get into like the 80s, and I think it all just kind of blew up, right? 80s into the 90s. And we would get, God, all of these authors and books on the subject, and it became totally homogenized, totally popularized. People looking for any modicum of personal power and wanted to call themselves a witch. And I think even that term has become, I don't know, what is a witch? Everyone says they are in terms of definitions. Almost like meaningless in many respects. So yeah, and I think so. It's far from these closed meetings of initiates, secret covens who are there tirelessly and quietly doing the craft as it's supposed to be done.
I agree. It has become, comparing with theater and with dramatic arts, which is very interesting. Fernanda Torres, which is the Brazilian actress that won her film "I'm Still Here," won an Oscar, and her mother, who is an incredible grande dame of the theater in Brazil. And theater and cinema in Brazil, her father as well. But her mother taught her that with the glory, there's always a parade of horrors. And I'm beginning to think, there's some parallel sometimes with the craft itself, because, I was taught as well by Maxine that what is really important is what happens in your own circle.
Yeah.
And you heard this as well from her.
Yeah.
But, I think that people are not really concerned about that anymore. They're really much more concerned about what is the image outside and what the perception it is, and who am I talking with, and what the play is, and how the games go behind the curtain. All of these things that, we lost the plot a long time ago, I think. Some of us, I think, are still trying to get into the, what is essential, and really try to inform people and try to kind of leading them into this other side, which is the side of truth and work and honest work and honest dedication to the circle of magic.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to agree. We lost the plot. Yeah, some had lost the plot forever.